So good morning, everybody, and welcome to this morning's AGP webinar. What should I be thinking about now with the lovely Nicola Rylett-Jones? Yeah, I can remember names if nobody else.
Sorry.
I will pass you over to Nicola.
How to win friends and influence people.
Just before we do, just a few housekeeping rules, which I know most of you will be aware of now, but I have to go through them. Please pop your microphone on mute to avoid any interference or background noise during the webinar. There will be a question and answer session later, at which point you can, of course, switch your microphones back on and ask your questions. Or if you prefer, you can ask any questions on the chat facility, and Nicola will try to answer as many of these as possible. If you need any support during the webinar, I'll be monitoring the chat. So if you have any problems, please just ask. We are being recorded. Just help us to collate any questions or comments which may be missed. If anyone has any questions or problems with that, please let me know. Following on from the webinar, I'll be sending you out 2 emails. One we obviously require you to sign a digital registration form for the Welsh Government, which comes across as an AG3. This will come via our HelloSign e-signature platform with a link. Really easy and takes less than a minute to do. So please could you do that and send it back over to me. Just allows us to confirm to the Welsh Government that the webinar took place and how many people attended. You'll also receive an email with a link to 2 surveys to provide feedback to us. So please can you complete those as well. Obviously, if you've already been on the webinars, you'll have done the COVID-19 survey, so you don't need to do that one again. On that note, I shall hand you back over to Nicola. So over to you.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm sorry about that again. Morning, everyone. Well, I just wanted to start with a bit of a statement, really. Today we're going to talk about what we should be thinking about in today's business landscape. And really, the first thing to say is businesses are as individual as the people that lead them. So although you might be struggling to recover at the moment, or you might be absolutely in capitalization mode because your business is going through the roof, there's an opportunity that you've seized on, or it might be that you're actually trying to find a new market. The current landscape is very multidimensional and it's difficult to know what to do. So what I wanted to do was to help you reclaim a little bit of control and so we can retake some of the success that you might have been having previously and even build on that success. So we're going to look at what the current situation is and what's happening. We're going to look a little bit for a few minutes about the change curve and your appetite as a business leader for change, and how to assess that in your business. Then we're going to look at the business in general and look at 7 areas you should be thinking about and some of the questions you might be asking yourself. And at that point, by the way, don't really worry about writing everything down. I'll send the presentation across to Lisa and the team and they can forward that. And also I've got a PDF document with all the questions listed for you with the change curve survey as well. So that don't worry about writing everything down. You'll get all that after the session. Then we're going to talk about how you might prepare to adapt and some of the plans that you might be able to take forward depending on the opportunity, and then how you can move forward today. So hopefully by the end of the session, I'll be able to give you some clarity about the current position of your business, or more clarity. You might already have some, but more clarity on the current position of your business, understanding about what change curve is and where you are and what you need to do next, and then the diagnostic tool for the future of the business. This is my sort of thought process, really. As you can see, the orange and the green sections here, the world's in reset. We know that's happening. We're in the middle of it at the moment. And I think there's going to be a bit of a market reboot. People are talking about recession. Some people are talking about depression. The market's going to change though, okay? So we need to assess your business in that light, in this current position of a market reboot. And then we need to make a decision. Is your business viable? Is it viable long term? Is it viable with adaptations, or is it not viable at all in moving forward? And that's the thing that's important, isn't it? Because once we've made that decision, you then need to transform. You need to act. You need to protect. You need to pivot, or you need to get out. And I mean that about closing the business in a graceful way. And there are people that actually close businesses down every day of the week, and they do them in such a way that they can then go in a future position, set up something else, and still keep all the reputation and the stability of running a good business. I think one of the things that we must do, though, is we must act. It's no good waiting. Many organisations did at Brexit, there was a lot of uncertainty, and that's difficult. But actually, if we wait, I don't think the situation is going to get less complex. I think it might get even more complex and even more difficult. So I think now is the time to sort of start moving. And if you've already pivoted, that's great. What's the long-term plan? Are you going to stay pivoted, or actually going to change back? If you're already mothballed, is that a permanent position, or actually can you change? Or actually, how do you restart the business if you have mothballed? So lots of different questions. You're all individual. So I've kept this content quite generic, but happy to help with questions if you have anything at the end, and also happy to pick up later on. The AGP are great at supporting that. But let's have a look at the current situation. The current situation, obviously, people are feeling, people, and by that I mean you, I mean your teams, I mean your customers, I mean your stakeholders and suppliers. People are feeling a bit of a lack of control. Now that we might become a bit more used to that because it's been 11 weeks now, but actually there's still that level of, well, I can't do this and I can't do that and I can't do this. So there's a lack of control. They're uncertain about the future, actually. Nobody quite knows when we're even going to send our kids back to school, never mind what's going to happen with businesses and how we're going to work in the future. So there's worry, there's anxiety, and there's concern about people's livelihood. That's all to do with the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and we'll come on to that in a second. But if we add in remote working, that's given another dimension. So people could feel lonely, people could feel trapped. You know, the kids are on top of them, there's no space. They might feel a little directionless. They're doing their work, but actually are they doing the work that actually is appropriate and feeling like they're adding value? Because there's a lack of communication, they might not feel that. Have people's behaviours changed? I would say yes. Our habits have changed. My week has changed. My weekends have changed. The way I work has changed. What I'm talking to people about has changed. So questions for yourself about the current situation. What are you noticing about your customers? What are you noticing about your team? How are things different? When was the last time you heard from any of your stakeholders about things other than what was happening in the day-to-day? Because obviously keeping connected is really important. So it's a moving feast, a lack of control, and that's creating uncertainty and worry. And that really, as I said earlier, this is Maslow hierarchies of needs. And this basically categorises 5 basic human needs. And I think when all COVID started, we're right down in the bottom of the red and the orange, really, the safety needs, you know, am I going to have my health? What's going to happen to my employment? I think now we're maybe missing a bit more of the love and the belonging, the friendship, the family, the sense of connection. We're getting to start missing a bit of that now. But ultimately, it is this event has really come to the core of our needs as a society. So that's where we are currently, and I don't need to go over that too much. I'm going to rattle through. But what is the curve change? Well, this is the curve change. This is Kubler and Ross, and they basically said that this was the curve change for individual emotional responses to change. Now, so it wasn't really related to business in the first place, but you know, you could apply it to how people experience and feel change. And your business is full of people, and so they will be going through this emotional change in your business if you're thinking of changing something. Now, there's no right or wrong timescale with change. And this curve doesn't happen over a set period of time or in a set way. But what happens is that people have to work their way through it. Now you can see the strategies on the right-hand side. These are the square boxes. And if you see they're color-coded to the sections of the curve. So what we need to do is to align those strategies with the particular position of the curve. So if your team is still in denial about change, you need to create alignment. If your team are getting frustrated, that they don't feel they're getting anywhere, you need to communicate to them. When they're in the valley of despair and there's a bit of depression going on and they're not feeling very motivated, you need to spark that motivation. Then you need to develop their capacity, and then you need to share their knowledge when they're getting to acceptance. So understanding that curve change, and the question I would ask you is, where is your business? Where is your team? How are your team responding to change at this time in your business? And as I said, it takes courage really to change a business, and our leadership responsibility is to make considered decisions to help people guide them through this change. But actually, if you can look at the change more positively, and our role as leaders is to help people look at these changes in a positive way, then actually you can increase the optimism, and you can reduce the depth that you go to in the valley of despair, which means ultimately you will increase productivity and have a better outcome. So our job as a leader is to help the team see the positive change the positive that could come from the change, and they'll spend less time in that emotional valley of despair. So let's have a look. How is your business? Is it ready for change? What changes do you want to make? So when we are talking to some of our clients, we take them through the emotional change curve, and then we ask them some questions around how they manage change themselves on a personal level, but also within the business. So there's a survey we can send you all, and this just helps you to understand where you are in that change curve and how you will be adapting to change. And there obviously you get a rating, and from that rating you can then say the kind of things you need to focus on to help your team have a more positive outcome to change. So point one, understand where you are in your change thoughts, your emotional attachment to change, and where are your team. Many of you will have understood the C's of change. They started off many years ago about being 3 C's for change. Then recently, over the last few years, it's become 5 C's for change. But actually, I think it's more like 7. So that on the top right-hand side here, I think we absolutely need to be committed. We need to be confident. We need to communicate. We need to celebrate. But actually, we need complete clarity of where you're trying to get to. What are you trying to change, and why are you trying to change it? And then I think these days, really management is about coaching and challenging your team to step up, to take that responsibility and accountability to change. So as I say, point one, where's your team on the curve, the change curve? Where are your styles around how you manage change within the organization? And then let's look at how we get some clarity and coaching into the team. So how do you want your business to look like? Sorry, what do you want your business to look like? What would work feel like? What would the transition mean in terms of the business? There's some exercises here that will help you get a bit of clarity around that. And we're just talking earlier about the alignment of the vision, the mission, and the values. I don't know how many of you know Simon Sinek. I've read all of his books, and I think he's quite a leader in terms of the thought process around why set up a business and the just cause of a business. But in times like this, when you are trying to visualize what your future might be, going back and really tapping into the why you set up the business will help you decide if some of the things that you model for the future are the right thing for your business. So, for example, we're looking here at why you set up the business, what's the just cause behind the business, the visionary, aspirational, long-term goal. So not just what I'm going to do, because that might change now, but actually, why am I doing what I do? What is the long-term impact? How are we going to make the world a better place in effect? What's that long-term vision? And just for those that, and you probably all know this, but my quick view on vision and mission, vision is your long-term aspiration. So for example, in 1963, it's very topical at the moment, JFK said, we are going to put a man on the moon. That's a vision. That's a long-term aspirational vision. The mission was they had to set up NASA, and they had to set up the space program, and they had to train the astronauts, and that was what they were going to do to put a man on the moon. Okay. So have a look, have a think, go back to tap into your why, make sure your vision and mission are absolutely clear, and that you are focused on what you want that long-term output to be. Not the what you're going to do, because that might change, and we need to sort of be more flexible about that, but what is that long-term vision and mission sort of alignment. A way of looking at that, by the way, is 3 exercises there. I keep them different depending on the audiences I'm talking to. So this is a real practical test you can give you and your team. The first one is to draw a picture of a car. So draw a car, tell me what kit it's got on it, how big is it, how many people are in it, what colour is it, what brand is it, and why have you chosen that brand? What is it about that brand that you associate with your business? You could do the same thing with a desert island. Draw a desert island. Draw it now. What's on the desert island? How many people are in it? What's your transport system? How do you get your food? How do you entertain yourself on the island? All that stuff can be drawn onto an island. And the same with a department store. What are the departments you have within your department store? Do you have a cafe? How do people get to the department store, etc., etc.? So draw that now. An example could be, for example, if you're a big tech company, you might decide your company is currently a Tesla, but it might be a Tesla with only 2 seats. And actually, obviously, the next thing I'm going to say to you is you then draw your car or your desert island or your department store in 2 and 3 years' time and show what you'd like the car to be like. So in fact, it might be a 2-seater Tesla, but actually you want it to be an electrically operated bus, so you can get many more people on the bus. And it's got, it didn't have sat nav, but now it's got sat nav because you've got an automated system to help your customers buy your product. So you can see how by associating a car or a department store or drawing something as it is now, and then visualizing what you want it to look like should hopefully help you align the missing bits in the middle. So that's just an exercise on how you can look at creating future sort of pictures for what you want your business to be. Now, that's sort of in effect tapping into your reason for doing a business and also looking at what your business needs to look like in the future from your perspective. But also another way of looking at this is just checking on the resilience of the business. So where is your business currently in its resilience sort of banding? How shored up is your current cash flow position? What's your future business planning? Do you look at PESTLE? So that's the political, the environmental, the social, the technological, the legal, and the environmental factors that might affect your business. So by looking through those, and there are exercises, just go have a look on the internet, you'll find plenty of them. There are exercises you can do to go and check those things. How do they affect your business? How are they going to affect the resilience of your business? Are you recession proof? Do you have a contingency plan? Are you focused on customers? So you can look again at the future of your business and say, okay, where are we now with our current cash flow? Where are we now with our future proofing? Where are we now with our recession proofing? And then again, look at the future and say, right, okay, if our current cash flow is poor, what do I need to do to make sure that I've got, you know, a X amount of percentage confidence in my cash flow? So assessing your business. Okay, so if we look at, these are 7 areas, and I'm going to rattle through these quite quickly. But again, don't worry about writing the questions down. They'll be sent to you. 7 areas that you might need to look at just to assess your business in the round. And governance, property, that's the office, the location, the physical workspace, if you have that. Operations, finance, sales and marketing, people, your resources, your team, and technology and security. So if we go through those now, if we look at the first one is governance. Now here's a list of some of the questions you might want to look at from governance. And to me, governance is not just the maintenance of an internal HR policy or making sure you've got a process in place. It plays a significant part for me in developing the resilience of the organization, because these policies, these procedures are what you fall back onto to make sure the business can run smoothly and can transform, particularly in times of change and transformation. So, you know, we all know organizations aren't static. Nothing stays the same. And if you do, you'll be falling backwards. So you always need to keep moving. And so good governance, good behaviors, good values, all contribute to the survival of your business. So as I said, there could be things like the compliance of a risk register, and we'll come on to that later, or it could be looking at how you capture feedback in the organization to see if your decision-making process is working well, or actually how is the organization learning from its mistakes, and what have you learned about the organization and how it needs to work in the future. So these would be some of the questions you'd ask yourself about the governance of how you're running your business. Next area I've put all together under operations, and this is everything from the market to your process to your product. So there's lots of questions here you can ask yourself, but here are some of the more obvious ones. And really, you know, they don't highlight all the areas you could look at in operations, because obviously, as I said, all the organizations we've got online here are different, but actually they probably cover quite a lot of the things that you've been needing to think about. You're really trying to consider the various impacts of outside external factors and how they affect your operation. So what is happening to the market? That's the PESTLE, as I mentioned earlier. How does your product seem relevant to the market? Or actually, has the market's needs changed? And in which case, what others are doing, and how can you copy them? So really looking at your operations, it's everything from the processes that you've got. Are they now outdated? Has something changed drastically with the process, which means actually you need to review it, i.e. you had a particular physical process, now people can't come into that work environment anymore, so you've had to make it online. Is that a fully functioning process, or does it need review? Is it something you can automate in the future and make the business even more efficient? So operations, obviously looking at the efficiencies of the organisation and trying to understand the impact of any external factors before you have to potentially make any decisions about restructuring and things like that. How do you support your team and motivate your team? So people, I mean, obviously we all know an organisation's resilience, continued success is down to the team and largely dependent on the team and the skills of the team and the capacity within the team and the ability within the team to keep moving forward and to find the problems and the solutions, to the problems. So processes and policies will get you some way, but ultimately, even if you have policies and procedures, you still have to train your team, and your team still have to take those policies and move them forward as a business. So what we're looking here is to see how your team are looking at the change. How are they motivated? How are they communicating? Are they working as a team, or are they finding that difficult because of the physical environment? How do you review your staff needs? How many of them are finding this change interesting and positive, and how many of them are finding the change is hard? What's the gaps within their skills? So obviously at the moment you might be in a certain position. Earlier in the conversation we've talked about how you would look at what you need for the future. So actually it's then up to us to help get the team to move and to understand where you want to go to and from, and then actually look at the resources you have and see if you've got all the skills you need, or whether you'll need to change any of your workforce. So that might be a sort of an interesting sort of gap analysis around what you might need for your business in the future, and whether you've got those skills, and whether your team are adaptable enough to make those changes. And they can be coached, and they can learn new things all the time, can't they? So the answer might be yes. But might there be any other forced changes? We've got maternity and sickness absence, but also potentially with lockdown and with the changes with the way people are working, there might be more childcare issues or dependency issues in terms of looking after elderly relatives and the like. So where are you with your people, and what can you do to establish the changes needed, and then mitigate the risk for them to transform and thrive in your organisation? I'm rattling through these quite quickly, but you know, you get the points of what you need to look at. In terms of finance, well, obviously, finance is in effect, you know, one of the main areas we need to be looking at, and managing cash and cash flow is really important. How you go through your burn rate, how much you influence that burn rate of the organisation, how many reserves you've got, how long your reserves will last, those kind of things need to be worked through. We need to work out how you're going to manage your cash, and how you're going to make sure your reserves are met and keep you going for as long as you can. As soon as COVID hit, I did a sort of a gosh, if all hell broke loose, what would I do next, and how long would I be able to survive? And I did a bit of a survival mode model, and that is, I keep updating that on a weekly basis, just to see if it's changed, if it's getting better, if it's getting worse. What's the current debt situation? Have I got enough money to pay my creditors on the date that they're due? If not, there might be a question of insolvency, and there are ways of taking a business and making it insolvent in a really positive way. Not that I hope any of you would have to get to that point, but if you do, there is a really positive way that you can do it. Do you have liabilities that are greater than your assets? Do you have assets actually that you need to consider whether you actually need to sort of liquidate those assets and help the business in the long term? Can you apply for grants and loans? You know, obviously the Welsh Government and other government organisations in the UK have done a great job so far of supporting businesses, because they felt it was important to keep the economy moving forward. But is that going to be enough? One of the things I think that we often all think about is that, you know, cash is the lifeblood of an organization, and actually a grant or a loan is only so good as long as you can sell something or create a revenue generating stream for the business to be able to pay that loan back or to be able to pay your staff to work. So let's have a think about that in terms of deciding where you want to put your money. If you have money and you can invest money, what is the best investment that you can make? Coming on to revenue, obviously sales and marketing is an area that needs to be looked at. What is the current customer journey? Can it continue? Do you have a product that people want? We talked about that earlier, but actually, are they wanting it in a different way, or are they wanting it from an alternative channel? So if you've always advertised a high street shop, or you've always had a physical presence somewhere and people aren't going to go to that area anymore, how can you change that way of sales and marketing so your message still gets out there? What's happening to your audience? Have their behaviors changed? Have the questions that they're asking themselves about buying your product changed? So in sales and marketing, really, there's a psychology to purchase. If you look at Amazon, you'll see this very clearly in how they get us all to buy things all the time. But there's a psychology to purchase. The first thing is you have an awareness of what, something's going wrong. Your washing machine's making a noise. Your laptop's running a little bit slow. And that awareness then turns into research and familiarity. So you go off and you research what might happen. So you might put a question into Google. What happens when my washing machine makes this noise? Why would my computer slow down? Okay. Then all of a sudden there'll be a purchase to trigger. There'll be a trigger purchase point where your computer either stops working or your washing machine stops working, or like me, I did recently with my laptop, I dropped it on the floor and smashed the screen accidentally. But obviously that meant I couldn't use my laptop. So there's a purchase I've got to go and trigger. There's something that triggers me to want to go and buy. Then you start researching more seriously, and then you start doing some considerations and comparing like for like. So in each of these stages, that's what happened pre-COVID, it's what's happening now. But in each of these stages, the question now might have changed. So where, for example, previously somebody might have gone and researched a new washing machine by walking into Currys or another electrical branded organisation, now they'll probably go on the internet first and have a look at comparisons websites. Where before they might have popped and given you a phone call or popped to your office to meet with you, now they'll be probably again going to search online first of all, but maybe they're asking for a video conference. So what behaviours are changing, and how can you match that with your sales and marketing process? Also, what might happen to your customers if a serious recession comes? What might they consider to be an essential purchase? What messaging might best resonate in a time when people are very worried about money? And if you look back to the 2008 timescale, or even further back, there's a number of recessions you can look at. Go and have a look on the internet. You can see how some people started to change their messaging, and also fundamentally looking about what the essential things that people needed, rather than maybe trying to sell an all bells and whistle product. So you just need to consider that for your business. What do your customers want? What do they need? And how might that change if money gets a bit tight and if a recession hits? Technology. So when was the last time that you looked at your technology? Obviously our reliance on it whilst the self-isolation and lockdown has happened has become more, and actually the importance of technology in terms of moving our businesses forward, but also in terms of remote working for our teams, keeping connected to our families and friends, all these collaborative tools, all these systems and processes, that we've become more reliant on them. But actually, are they where you need them to be? Or actually, have you just put a sticky plaster on the problem that arose with an instant everybody needs to work from home? So have you given everybody laptops, have you given everybody laptops and they're all working from home, but they're all working on a physical process like they would have done in the office? Actually, is there a way of investing in automated software and tools that will mean that your business can be even more efficient and your team can do even more exciting work? Again, we need to look at the security and the data and the systems and the storage and the recovery and the risk around the organisation potentially having a security breach. And obviously that's become greater the more dependent we come on systems. And so looking at that as a business would be important. So some of the questions here about, you know, reviewing your business processes, checking on your technology that you use, looking at the automated software and tools. A really interesting question to ask your team is which tools and systems have they downloaded? Now, you might have a policy where they're not supposed to download any of these things, but they might have it on their phone. Now, they're working into between these two sort of items. You know, I've got my phone here, work on that sometimes I'll be on my laptop. We work independently and at the same time on both sort of ways of both equipment, both bits of equipment. So actually they might not have downloaded anything onto your systems because actually you've got a policy on that, but they might have it on their phone and they still might be working using that system. So that could be a weakness and a risk. If they then go onto the phone and look at their emails, there could be some security issues there. So just looking at those kind of things would be really important. And then finally, sort of health and safety. Obviously, we might have a physical presence. I have an office. You might have a workshop. You might have vans. You might need people to be out on the road. What measures are you putting in place at the moment to make sure you can maintain social distancing? How important is that in your business for you and for your stakeholders and for your customers? Actually, with regards to your suppliers, what are they doing to maintain some of the safety issues that we need to look at? So if you're getting some stock in, what's that, you know, is that stock safe? How are they bringing it in? How long might it take? Are there issues with the things coming into the building? One of the interesting things that I didn't even think about was toilets and flushing toilets and Legionnaire's disease in a building that's been empty for 12 weeks, actually going and doing things like standing water checks, making sure that you have the health and safety of the building checked before anybody goes back in would be really important. I've got a client that's got quite an old church style building. And actually they've got a number of ways you can walk around the building. And so they've decided to use a one-way system. You know, you'll walk up one set of stairs one way and you'll walk down the other set of stairs to try and make sure that people don't necessarily have to pass in a very narrow corridor. So are there things like that you need to consider with your workplace? Do you need to consider how people are going to get to the workplace? Is that safe for them to do so? We've been asked to not use public transport so much at the moment, and people might not feel comfortable. What's the opportunity for people to continue working from home remotely, and actually what are the lessons you can learn from that? Are there things that you want to increase in terms of efficiency and things you've thought that's been brilliant, we've done a really good job on that in terms of people working from home, or actually are there things that you might want to change because of people working from home? One of the things that people are concerned about in terms of property and how you work and where you work, particularly with home working, is taking some time off, and actually making sure that people don't spread themselves too thinly and work constantly and always be switched off. They do need some downtime. So how are you considering that for the team and for the way you work? So that really was a really quick run through of some of the questions you might be thinking at the moment. And as I said, that's giving you an assessment of your business. And once you've gone through those things, you should be able to do, if you sort of work through them logically, you should be able to decide with the questions you've asked yourself about the business position at the moment, and then the future view of your business. You should be able to decide if what you've got at the moment is viable as it is. Capitalize on the opportunity, transform, act, really push. You should be really maximizing every opportunity. Or maybe actually it's not quite viable as it is and it needs some adaptations. So that's when we need to either pivot, or we need to either change something you're doing to make your business more efficient. It might not be viable at all, and actually you might think by the time you've looked at all your PESTLE, you've looked at the future view of the business, actually the requirement and the need is not the same anymore, and in which case you might want to then close the business in a really graceful fashion and you know, look at insolvency, or look at closing the business in a positive way and talking and communicating to all your stakeholders and keeping the reputation where it needs to be. But those questions should help you get into that position of being able to look at those decisions. But one of the things people say to me is, but there's so many things I don't understand, Nicola, there's so many things I can't answer. What if I don't have all the information? How am I going to answer these questions? Well, the McKinsey Consulting Group talk about these following things. The first thing is define the decision you're trying to make or that you want to make. You know, is the decision, is my business viable? Right, okay, how do I figure that out? Gather all the information you can by using some of the questions we've talked about earlier, and decide what you can be certain of. So when you're writing the answers down, maybe give it a point out of 10 or a percentage of how certain you are about that answer. And then in the questions that you can't answer or you don't know 100%, put another question. I will go and find out X, Y, and Z, because that will then help you identify the things you need to go out more externally about and find out more information from friends, colleagues, external sources like the government websites or business support like AGP or Business Wales. There's plenty of people out there that can help and advise you. But they're the questions then you go out and find the answers to. Maybe your team can help you with that. Once you've got all that information, you need to develop a hypothesis of where you are in terms of this is what I think is happening to my business and this is where I think I am. Then from that, is the answer going in the right direction? So how, in your gut, does the answer feel like it's in the right space? So if it's a financial question and you're worried about cash flow, does it feel like it's going in the right direction? You might not exactly get the right numbers. Does that matter? As long as you're in the right ballpark and you think it's going in the right direction, that should be confidence enough for you. And what do you believe in? Do you believe that that is the way forward? Are other people talking about that as being the way forward? And then if all else is not quite sure, develop a what if. So you've got all your information, you've developed your hypothesis, you think it's going in the right direction, you believe it's there or thereabouts. Then the things that you're not so sure about, develop a what if. So, okay, I'm happy with the business. I think the cash flow is going to be okay. If I develop this process and make efficiencies here, I think that will work well for us and we'll be able to survive or we'll be able to capitalize. But actually, what if I lose this person in my team? What if I lose this revenue? What if the government don't give us any more support? What if sales of this product just absolutely go through the roof? Those kind of things are great for scenario planning and business continuity planning. And we'll come on to that in a second. And obviously, if you don't have all the information, discuss it with others. Check your theory externally. Find a critical friend. Talk to your colleagues. Talk to people that run businesses. You might have a mentor, your AGP relationship manager. Those people can help you talk through these issues. So we talked a little bit more about what if, and one of the things I like to do at this point is develop a financial and resources plan. And this helps me get a bit more confident. And there's a really simple way that you can do that. This is a really simple approach. There are more complex approaches, and if you've got a good finance director, they'll have done this already for you. But I was just wanting to give people a really top level approach to this. Review the last 6 months of revenue. What was the current average? What's the trend? What's happened pre-COVID? What's happened post-COVID? Where are your revenues generated from? If you have a product range, what's your most profitable product? Where does most of your money come from? Are there products that actually just aren't selling at the moment? Have a look at how that revenue is being generated. And then from that, what's the cost to the business? Review the costs, review the cash flow. What is essential to your business and what isn't essential? There might be some direct debits and things that you're paying for as a business. It might be a subscription to a magazine. It might be something your team wanted to have access to. Maybe it's the fruit bowl that comes into the office once a week, or maybe it's that gym membership that people can't use at the moment. But there might be some costs in the business that can be changed. And then model a future state. So, and you might want to look at that on a monthly basis, or you might want to look at a weekly basis, depending on what your business is. So just a physical example of this is a made up spreadsheet. But as you can see here, I've modeled what I think might happen if we lose 10% of the business, if we lose 20% of the revenue, if you lose 30% of the revenue, 40%, and so on and so forth. And actually what I've done is I've figured out as a business that we're okay to lose, in this example, about 50% of the revenue coming into the business. Now, obviously this will be different for all of you, but actually it's a really good thing to get a habit to get into, to say, okay, if I lose 10%, okay, I'm going to be okay. Actually, it's not great, but I'm going to be okay. It gives you a bit of confidence. And actually, if you get all the way through to, 50%, well, I can lose 50% of my business and I'm still going to be okay. That might give you quite a lot of confidence to make some other decisions, to invest in the business in a different way rather than worrying about the money. But you can notice I've actually done some green sections there. And that's because at this point, this made-up company I was thinking of needed a profit of about £5,000 a month. And so actually, when we went under that figure, I wanted to start doing something. And so actually, what you can then do is plan your activity for each phase of change. So in this instance, in the light green section there, which was, at 40%, I would cut any unnecessary spend. I would reduce travel. I'd do no repairs. I might even make one person redundant or cut one person's hours. And then I would look at what we're spending on IT and consumables, and I'd make sure we didn't spend any more money on that. And obviously, these are my examples. You would pick what would be appropriate for you. But then when you get into the darker green, the 50% reduction and the 60% reduction, these are some things. I would have a rent payment holiday, or I'd try and get a rent payment holiday. I would cut any director's pay, and I would potentially need to do a 10% reduction of pay across the staff. Only when I'm getting to the 60% do I then need to look at redundancy and restructuring, and maybe even remove some of my business consultancy and other items. I put that in because obviously that's made up business I was thinking to myself. So you can see there, by just doing a really top line simple model, you can think about actually what is the pivot for you. It might be if you lose 20% of your revenue because your profit is margins are quite low, then you might need to start doing some of the things. But if you plan it and you phase it, then you feel more comfortable and confident that you've got a plan of action. So when it happens, you're not as panicked or worried about making those decisions, and it's a bit calmer. You can communicate them more efficiently to people around you. You can also do a risk register. This is an example of a risk register, which might look at some of those what ifs. And I would put my what ifs on this risk register. So what if 3 members of our team couldn't work? What if we lost 60% of our revenue? We lost 20% of our revenue? What if our product wasn't needed anymore? What if our physical location just becomes too much for us and it's not safe to go back to it? You can put all your what ifs on your risk register. Many of you will know how to work a risk register, but just this one particularly has an impact analysis on the significance. The S stands for significance, the P stands for probability, and the G stands for gross risk. So how significant is it? What's the probability of it happening? So what does that mean? Is it a gross risk or is it a minor risk? And you can talk about the solutions here in this area. I'm rattling through this, chaps, but obviously we're getting to a point where we can decide where we are, and then we can transform to the next point. So you want to really look for the gap. So you've looked at the change curve, you understand where you are as a business, you've understood where you are in terms of your end goal, your vision, and what you're trying to achieve as an organisation, and then you've looked at the current position of the business, and you've set what you want the future position of the business to be, and then you've gone and looked through some of the cash issues and some of the financial issues, some of the people issues, to make sure you understand what the risk might be to the business. It's important then to look for the gap. So the way we do that is to, as I say, look at the current position, look at the future position, and obviously map those particular what ifs in the middle. And then you can set yourself 3 goals. I would never do more than 3 goals. In fact, to be honest, I prefer to have one really important goal. But you might need 3. So one might be shore at the cash position. One might be look at the product and develop a different product to match your different needs. Or it might be to change the product range completely so that you've got a basic model ready for a recession coming in. Or actually it might be, if you're doing really well at the moment, it might be how do I maximize production so I can actually take more orders and make sure we're more sustainable because we're doing really well at the moment. It could be I need to retrain my staff because actually my current way of working needs to change, and so the process will change, and so I need to upskill my staff in a different area and my team in a different area. That would depending on where you are as a business. So to recap, so we can do questions. It starts with you. I've just recapped it in a different way, but it starts with you. You need to organise your response to change. You need to understand where your business is. You need to take some control back by understanding the current position, the what ifs, and where you want to get to, and then the differences in the middle. You need to get a whole picture of the business, and then you need to look at that from a calm, assured, and slightly optimistic point of view. So be decisive, be persistent, communicate, think about all the relevant information you need, and get yourself that clear thought of where you are and where you want to go for the future. Your team, though, play a really important part in any change. You need to give them the opportunity to take some control. So getting them to understand where you are on the change curve is really important, and getting them to understand about the business and what the fundamental of the business is and why the business is there. And then they can help change the business, and giving them opportunities to help change. You need to think of their safety, of course, and you need to keep communicating with them about the change, because that's the only way that people are positive about, I like to call it progression, not change. Provide them with opportunities to solve problems and to improvise and to get a win, and then remind them about how resilient they are. And obviously your team you need to think about how you get them to stay connected to projects, how you buddy them, how you give them mentoring. And obviously the more wins you can get, the more momentum you'll get to get you over the change curve. But obviously you need to also understand what their skill base is and understand if you need to retrain them at all. Plan for the what if. So model the good, the bad and the ugly. I gave you the little example there, which was just a very simple example, but you could do that to say, okay, I'm just going to model this for a 20% loss. Actually, I'm going to model this for 100% loss. What happens then? How do we work as a business? What can we look at? Have a plan to fail gracefully. I say there's quite a few ways that you can close a business with keeping your reputation and your brand and the positive sort of aspects of what you've done intact. So that's really a sort of really challenging thing to do, but it is possible. Understand what your milestones are. So understand the key points that are really important to your business. So is it cash flow that's important, or actually do you have enough cash flow and you have enough assets? Is it more about actually selling products, and that's what's more important, and investing in selling and taking the opportunity forward? Remember what your main problems are and how you're going to address them, and then get additional support if you need. So plan for the what if. Now there is an important point, I've just put it here, but I think you also need to understand what happens if it isn't going to come back. Back in the 2008 recession, I used to work for a digital marketing magazine. In fact, I used to work for a magazine, it's now a digital magazine, and we used to sell advertising, and we sold advertising. And in the 2008 recession, that obviously was quite a hard hit. But we kept working really, really, really hard, absolutely eking out every contact we had, doing deals, doing promotions, really trying to get advertising in our magazine. And really, if we'd have thought about it and we'd thought about the challenge of the digital magazine coming in the future, and we'd really thought more long term about that decision and the benefits that digital advertising could have, we might not have spent so much energy in trying to keep the paper print advertising going. We could have maybe spent those 6 to 8 months focusing on the digital area rather than actually just trying to keep hold of the old stuff. So I suppose the point is to plan for the what if, but actually also be realistic about what that what if means, and don't wait too long to make a decision. In effect, I think they call it, eat your babies or whatever. Don't worry about cannibalizing your sales. Think about it very seriously. But if you think that actually stopping something because there's something better in the future coming, or another way of working that's better for you, your energy is better in getting yourself ready for that change than actually holding on to something that might not be around for a long time. So it's a lot of wasted energy, really. And then stay connected. So we've talked about that in terms of making sure that your customers, your team, your suppliers, your stakeholders, your network, your supporters, you're constantly in touch with them. They give you intelligence, you give them intelligence. It's all about keeping informed and keeping up to date with the relevant information, because the much wider position you have, the more connected you are, the more you'll be able to make informed decisions. So encourage people to speak up. Your team are great. They've got ears as well. So ask your team what they're hearing on the grapevine, what they think is going to happen. If they're speaking to customers, get your sales teams to give you information, feedback about that external source of information. Tap into government support and get lots of opinions. But remember, what's the question you're trying to answer and what's important to you? So yes, get lots of rounded information, but ultimately think about it from your perspective and make sure the information you're gathering is in relation to the questions that you're trying to ask your business. So there you go. I've rattled through, Lisa. I think we've got some time for questions.
Yes, we do. I haven't got anything on the chat facility, but if anybody wants to come off their microphones and ask Nicola some questions, now's your time to do so.
It was a rattle.
You must have presented very well.
or they're all just bored of my voice because it has been 55 minutes. Sorry, folks. I didn't think it would take that long. Don't worry about it. If you've got questions, you're more than welcome to send them through. I mean, obviously, it depends on your position as an organisation as to how you look at these questions. Some of you might be looking at them really positively. You might have had a fantastic few months because actually your organisation pivoted really quickly and you found a solution to a need. And in which case, just have a look at these questions from the point of view of whether it's a temporary pivot or a permanent pivot and how long you think that pivot's going to last for. That's the what if planning, isn't it? That's the scenario planning for the what if. It's complex. We don't all have the answers, but you need to get as much information as you can, and then figure out the questions that you need. Oh, have we got a question there? No questions at this stage. But great, thanks, Dan. Yeah, you need to be careful to make sure that you get the information that you need to answer the questions you've got at the moment. But keep an eye on the what if, because it's a complex moving feast at the moment. And so if you can do a quick review once a week on the questions you've asked yourself and just see if anything's changed. And there's lots of questions here, but some will be more important than others to you. So pick out the ones that are important and just keep an eye on them every week.
Okay, I think we're good this morning then. So thanks for everyone for attending, and obviously thank you, Nicola, for presenting for us. Hopefully you found it worthwhile, and be grateful for any feedback that you can give us for developing the webinar program. So thanks again, everyone, and have a good day.
Cool. Thanks, Nicola.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks all. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.